They seemed like the perfect family. Frank and Eleanor Hollow, their 2 children, James and Clara, an ordinary household in an ordinary town. They lived in a small white house at the edge of Ashford Hollow, New York. They went to church on Sundays. They mowed their lawn, waved to neighbors, and sent Christmas cards. But on the night of August 1st, 1953, they disappeared. No sign of struggle, no footprints, no packed bags. The dinner table was still set for 4, the radio was left on, whispering static. The dog was found alive, starving, trembling by the back door. And the Hollow family was gone. How does an entire family vanish without a trace? Where could they have gone? And what exactly did they believe in before they disappeared? Tonight, we're going to find out. Because the story of the Hollows isn't just about one missing family. It's about a small town that opened its doors to something it didn't understand and never fully recovered. According to official records, the Hollow case remains unsolved, but some who still live near the woods of Ashford Hollow swear the truth wasn't lost. It was buried. And when you start digging, you'll wish you hadn't. Frank Hollow had been a Navy mechanic during the war. Quiet, hardworking, with the kind of steady hand that could fix anything. When he returned home in 1946, he married Eleanor Morris, a schoolteacher's daughter with bright eyes and a gentle voice. They had 2 children and by 1950 settled in Ashford Hollow, a postcard town where nothing ever happened. Frank fixed cars at the local garage. Eleanor sewed dresses for the ladies in town. Their children rode bikes down the gravel roads and caught fireflies at dusk. To everyone around them, they were proof that the American dream was alive. But under the surface, something was shifting. In early 1953, a stranger arrived in town, a man who called himself Reverend Alton Vale. He rented a small room above the general store and began holding evening services in the basement of the old library. He said he wasn't starting a new church, but a study group for seekers of the hidden light. At first, no one paid attention, but curiosity spreads quickly in small towns. Reverend Vale was unlike any preacher Ashford Hollow had seen. He didn't speak about sin or salvation. He talked about the light behind the veil, about ancient truths that the church had locked away from the common soul. He spoke softly, rhythmically, with eyes that never blinked long enough. People left his meetings confused, but calm. They said he made them feel something. By spring, more than 20 people were gathering twice a week in that basement, and one of them was Eleanor Hollow. At first, Frank didn't mind. He thought it was harmless, a bit of community gossip wrapped in mysticism. But soon, Eleanor began to change. In letters to her sister Margaret, she wrote about the light that hides within us and the great joining. She said Reverend Vale was teaching them to see the world as it really was, that humanity was on the brink of awakening. She wrote that Frank didn't understand yet, but would soon. Margaret later gave those letters to police. Her handwriting trembled when she read them out loud. By then, Eleanor wasn't writing about her children anymore. She was writing about the signs in the woods and the eye that watches all. Neighbors began noticing strange chalk symbols on the back steps of the Hollow home. Circles within circles, with triangles intersecting their centers. When asked, Eleanor smiled and said, "It's protection." Reverend Vale showed me. No one thought much of it. Ashford Hollow was a quiet town. People kept to themselves. But then came the meetings in the woods. They started in June. At night, deep in the trees outside town, faint lights could be seen flickering between the branches. Not firelight, but something bluish and cold. Some said it was the youth playing pranks. Others knew better. A woman who later came forward anonymously described what she saw one night. A circle of people standing barefoot in the clearing, lanterns forming a ring of pale light. In the center stood Reverend Vale, drawing a symbol into the dirt. The same eye and circle. He called it the Eye of Return. He said it was the gateway between the worlds. He told them the world they knew was only a dream, and if they opened themselves completely, they could awaken into the light. She said some people fainted. Others began to hum, low, inhuman sounds that vibrated through the ground. And for a moment, she swore she saw sparks rising from the soil, like static electricity climbing into the air. That was the last meeting she attended. But for the Hollows, it was only the beginning. By July, Frank had stopped showing up to work. He told his boss he was working on something bigger. Eleanor was rarely seen outside except for trips to Vale's gatherings. Neighbors said the children looked pale and distracted, standing in the yard, staring at the woods as if waiting for someone. Then came the letters. The Hollow mailbox began to fill with unmarked envelopes. No stamps, no return address. Inside were pages covered in geometric symbols, spirals, and phrases written in neat handwriting. "We are almost through. The light remembers. Do not fear the crossing. The handwriting didn't match Eleanor's or Frank's. Police later cataloged these as evidence, but no fingerprints were ever found. On August 1st, 1953, the Hollows invited their neighbors over for a small cookout. It was warm, the air thick with the smell of charcoal. Frank joked, Eleanor smiled, and the kids played near the porch. It was, by all accounts, perfectly normal, except for one moment when a neighbor asked if they'd be at church that Sunday. Frank just smiled and said, "We don't go there anymore." The light found us. That night, a storm rolled through Ashford Hollow. Thunder shook the windows. At 2:13 a.m., a farmer half a mile away reported hearing a high, steady tone, like metal screaming. The power flickered out for several seconds. When it returned, he saw a faint blue glow rising from the direction of the Hollow property. He assumed it was a power line or transformer. He went back to bed. The next day, the Hollow house was silent. The front door locked from the inside, the curtains drawn. No one answered the knock. By evening, neighbors called the sheriff. Deputies forced the door open. What they found inside would haunt them for decades. The dinner table was still set for 4, plates full, glasses half empty. The radio hummed softly on the counter, whispering static. The family dog was found in the kitchen corner, alive, starving, shaking. But of the family themselves, nothing. No signs of a break-in, no suitcases missing, no money withdrawn from the bank. The children's toys were still neatly arranged on their shelves. It was as if they had stood up in the middle of dinner and simply dissolved. In the basement, officers found something else. On the concrete floor was a large chalk circle. Inside it, 4 smaller circles, each with a name written in careful cursive. Frank, Eleanor, James, Clara. At the center was the same eye symbol that Eleanor had drawn on her steps, except this one wasn't chalk. It was a deep, dried red. The sheriff later wrote that he had never seen anything like it. He said the air in the basement felt heavy, like being underwater. When they turned off their flashlights, one deputy swore he could still see the circle faintly glowing in the dark. By morning, the FBI had been contacted, but they found no fingerprints beyond the family's own. No foreign fibers, no tracks outside. Even the dog's fur had traces of an unknown powder, later identified as fine limestone dust, like the kind found deep in the forest's old quarries. But no one had seen the Hollows leave. Within a week, Reverend Alton Vale was gone too. His room at the Ashford Inn was empty, bed neatly made. The landlady said he'd left early that morning, humming a tune she didn't recognize. He carried a small black leather case. When police traced his identity, they found nothing. No birth records, no ordination, no address. His social security number belonged to a man who died in Ohio in 1947. One investigator finally made a connection to a group called the Brotherhood of the Eternal Light, a small religious sect that had supposedly burned down in 1949, killing its members in a ceremonial fire. The group had worshipped an entity they called the Hidden Sun, believing that the material world was a false reflection of a higher realm. Reverend Vale's teachings, word for word, matched those found in the Brotherhood's surviving pamphlets. A single note was found in Vale's room at the inn. Written on hotel stationery, it read, "4 have crossed." The veil is thinner now. Police searched the woods for weeks. Dogs refused to go near the clearing. Locals reported lights in the trees and the smell of something metallic in the air after rain. The only thing ever found was a set of children's shoe prints leading into the forest, and none coming out. Months passed. The case went cold. The Hollow home was eventually boarded up. Neighbors moved away, but rumors stayed. Some said they'd joined a secret commune upstate. Others claimed they'd been taken by the government, part of Cold War psychic experiments. But those who lived closest to the woods whispered something else, that the Hollows hadn't left town at all. They were still there, just not in the same way anymore. 3 months after the disappearance, the sheriff received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a black and white photograph. The Hollow family standing in their yard, smiling at the camera. Behind them, near the tree line, was a faint, transparent figure. When the photo was compared to older ones, the figure was there too. Always in the same spot. Always watching. The film was verified as genuine. No signs of tampering. But no one could explain the figure. That photograph remains in police archives, sealed and marked as unresolved visual anomaly. To this day, when developed under ultraviolet light, faint handwriting appears along the bottom edge. It reads, "They are with the light." And that was where the story should have ended. A mystery frozen in time, a tragedy swallowed by the woods. But it didn't end there, because 3 years later something, or someone, came back. 3 years passed. By 1956, the Hollow House had become a local ghost story, a place teenagers dared each other to visit after dark. The boards on the windows had begun to rot. Inside, dust lay thick over everything: the dinner plates, the toys, the empty chairs. Time had sealed the scene like a museum exhibit of a family's final night. But in February of that year, something changed. A young couple driving along County Road 9 claimed to have seen a man walking near the old Hollow property. He was barefoot, wearing what looked like an old mechanic's jumpsuit. They said his face seemed pale, almost colorless, and his eyes reflected the headlights, like those of an animal. When police searched the area the next morning, they found nothing. Only a set of footprints in the frost that stopped abruptly halfway down the road. Within weeks, more reports followed. A gas station attendant claimed to see two children standing near the woods, hand in hand. When he called out, they turned toward him and vanished into the trees. A mail carrier swore he heard a woman's voice humming inside the Hollow House, even though it was locked and empty. And then came the letter. It arrived at the sheriff's office on March 10, 1956, typed on aged paper, unsigned, postmarked from Buffalo. It read, "The light took them, but they were not lost. When the circle opens again, they will walk among us." Investigators traced the paper to a discontinued stationery brand, sold only in the late 1940s. No fingerprints, no clues. But the postmark, the Buffalo Post Office, was only 6 miles from where Reverend Alton Vale had once organized his earlier gatherings. The timing, the message, it was too perfect to ignore. Deputy Carl Dwyer, the same man who'd first entered the Hollow home in 1953, reopened the case unofficially. He was older now, slower, but the disappearance had never left him. He started visiting local libraries, searching through old newsletters, regional bulletins, anything with the word light in it. By summer, he found what he was looking for: a newspaper clipping from 1949, a fire at a meeting hall in a small Pennsylvania town. The victims were members of a sect called the Brotherhood of the Eternal Light. According to the article, the fire began during a midnight ceremony. Witnesses saw a strange luminous haze above the building before it burned to the ground. No human remains were ever found. Among the listed members of the Brotherhood was one name that stood out: Alton Vale. Dwyer traveled to Pennsylvania that fall, interviewing surviving relatives of the victims. They described the Brotherhood as a cult promising illumination through the crossing. They practiced rituals involving mirrors, geometric patterns, and isolation in dark rooms for days at a time. They believed the human soul was trapped, that with the right symbols it could pass through the reflection of light into what they called the true world. Sound familiar? It was almost word for word what Eleanor Hollow had written to her sister. When Dwyer returned to New York, he found something waiting for him on his porch: a small plain envelope. No stamp, no handwriting, only a pressed wax seal with the symbol of an eye inside a circle. Inside was a single Polaroid photo developed recently. It showed the Hollow House, but in the reflection of a window, 4 faint silhouettes could be seen, standing close together, facing the glass. The deputy burned the photograph that night. He resigned a week later, claiming, "The case was not meant for men to solve." He moved out of state and refused all interviews until his death in 1972. After his departure, the case files gathered dust once again. But strange things continued to happen around Ashford Hollow. Hunters reported hearing music deep in the woods, soft, distant, like a hymn played underwater. A group of high school students exploring the abandoned house one Halloween described the sudden temperature drop and the smell of burnt ozone. One of them claimed he heard a man's voice whisper, "Do you see the light?" When police were called, they found the word "return" scratched into the basement floor, right where the chalk circle had once been drawn. The grooves were deep, etched into the concrete as if burned from within. By 1958, Ashford Hollow began to change. More families left the area, local businesses closed. People said the woods no longer felt safe, that sometimes at dusk, shadows seemed to move against the light instead of with it. Old-timers spoke of hearing voices under the sound of the wind, repeating phrases they couldn't understand. In 1961, a demolition crew was hired to tear down the Hollow House, but as the first bulldozer approached, its engine died. Mechanics couldn't restart it. A second machine broke its hydraulic line moments later. Work was postponed twice before the company finally abandoned the project. To this day, the house still stands, barely, hidden beneath vines and trees that seem to grow faster than the rest of the forest. The last known investigation came in 1975. A team of graduate students from a nearby university conducted electromagnetic readings on the property. Their report, later confiscated by local authorities, noted fluctuations of energy beyond measurable range, concentrated around the basement. Audio logs recorded faint murmuring voices, though the house was empty. One student described seeing a woman's silhouette at the top of the stairs, holding something small, maybe a child. He left the program shortly after, never speaking publicly again. That same year, a hiker discovered fragments of glass and metal arranged in a circle near the old quarry. Tests revealed traces of limestone dust, the same substance found on the Hollow family's dog decades earlier. Some researchers believe the site was used for Vale's final ritual, an attempt to reopen the passage he called the Eye of Return. And then, silence. Decades passed. The story faded into local legend, told around campfires and late-night radio shows. But every few years, someone new would come forward. A driver claiming to have seen lights hovering above the forest. A child who said she met the woman in white near the old road and that the woman asked for her children. Each story different, yet always the same. In 1998, the Hollow file was reopened one last time. A historian named Robert Kendricks was compiling records for a book on Cold War cults. He requested access to the Ashford Hollow archives. Among the items in storage, he found an unlabeled reel of 8mm film, brittle, unmarked except for the year, 1953. The footage, though degraded, showed a summer picnic. Children running through tall grass. Eleanor Hollow sitting under a tree, smiling at the camera. For a few seconds, everything seems ordinary. Then, without warning, the image flickers. The sky darkens. A blinding flash fills the frame. And when it clears, everyone in the shot is gone. The camera remains focused on the same patch of grass for almost a full minute, until a faint figure steps briefly into view. It's a man, tall, pale, with eyes that seem to catch the light like glass. He leans close to the camera and whispers something. Only one word was audible on the restored audio track. "Awake!" The film was sent to forensic analysts for verification. They confirmed it was authentic and shot on 1950s stock. But the light anomaly, the flash, didn't match any known film damage or exposure pattern. One technician later described it as similar to an arc discharge, something produced by high-voltage electricity. Another refused to finish the analysis, claiming he was having dreams of blue light after viewing it repeatedly. The reel was sealed in evidence. And that's where the trail ends. Today, the Hollow house still stands, leaning beneath the weight of decades. Windows shattered, porch half collapsed, but the basement door remains shut, fused by rust and time. Locals say that on still nights, you can see a dim glow seeping from the cracks in the foundation, a pale, cold light that pulses faintly, like something alive. No one goes near it anymore. And yet the legend persists, that the family never truly left Ashford Hollow, that they became part of something beyond the world they knew, that they crossed into the light veil promised them, and are still waiting for the rest of us to follow. Officially, the Hollow case remains closed. Unofficially, it never ended. Because if you walk through those woods on a moonless night, you might still hear the faint hum of a sermon carried on the wind. A man's voice, soft but insistent, asking the same question he asked 70 years ago. "Do you see the light?" And if you answer, you may never come back. If you made it this far, thank you for listening. Stories like this are only fragments, echoes of the strange and forgotten corners of our history. And here, we dig into them all. If you want to hear more tales like this, stories of lost families, hidden cults, and the things that slip between fact and fear, subscribe to the channel. There's much more waiting in the dark. Leave a like if you want this story to reach others who still search for the truth. It helps more than you think. And remember, every story starts as a whisper, but some whispers never stop.